أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. I have this remote, but I'm not sure exactly where I'm supposed to point it, so I'm trying around in different places here. Hopefully, okay, there you go, alhamdulillah. So I'd like to first start off by thanking the community for calling me here to talk about this beautiful topic. And I was delighted when I heard that this was going to be an interactive session. Generally, I find with teaching, whenever we want to discuss any kind of topic, especially something that is of practical relevance to us, it's always nicer to have an interactive environment where it's not just content coming from one side, but rather content that is exchanging from both sides. Because as much as I might have read around this topic, as much as I might have reflected about it, I'm sure all of you have also read around and reflected around topics of your own. And it is an enriching experience when we can exchange ideas together. So with that in mind, of course, the period of time we have is not a long time to look into a dua like Dua Kumayl. Dua Kumayl is a dua which is full of very deep reflections, ideas that will take time to unpack, time to think about, time to reflect upon, and time to reflect upon during our lives as well. As we take these ideas and move along with them, sometimes we have reflections as we have those ideas in our mind. As we mull over them, we find that we understand more about them. And what I really love about this program in terms of thinking about Dua Kumayl is it reminds me very much of a tradition that many of you will have heard many times, which is tafakkur sa'a afdal min ibadah sittina sana, or in some riwayat sab'ina sana, or in some riwayat sana, which means that to think for 1 hour is better than the worship of 60 years, or 70 years, or in some cases a year. And what that tradition reminds me of is, especially when we come to a prayer that we use ritualistically. We come and we recite Dua Kumayl every Thursday night, and many communities do. Without reflecting on that dua, without thinking about that dua, we are only making a certain amount of use of it. Whereas if we're to spend even 1 hour thinking about it, that 1 hour can be so beneficial that it can be worth our whole lifetime of reciting that dua. Our whole lifetime of reciting Dua Kumayl and doing that, if you like, very ritualistically and methodically throughout our lives, the whole benefit that is contained in that act can be encapsulated in our sitting down here today and thinking about it. So, without further ado, let us see if the slides here work. I'll keep... Okay, here we go. Oh, I've done too many. There you go. Okay. So the first question that I want to pose to all of you, and I want to hear back from you as well, is what is dua? What are we trying to do when we supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So I think there's some roaming mics going around. There was. And also my younger participants, I also encourage you to put forward your ideas as well. What is dua, if I was to ask you? To beg. Okay, so we have one idea here. It is to beg. Begging from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To talk, thank you, to communicate. Yeah, so perhaps not only asking for things, even talking, explaining how we feel, explaining what we go through. That is something that is done in dua, and of course something that is done in Dua Kumayl. In Dua al-Kumayl, if we think about some of the meanings that are in Dua al-Kumayl, the dua itself goes into some hypothetical situations. Oh Allah, if you were to put me in hell, then this is what I would do. Oh Allah, how can you do this to me if this is the way I am? Right? Is a conversation. Thank you very much. A communication. What else? What comes to our minds when we say, what is dua? A bargain. Yeah, that's a good word as well. Especially again here in Dua al-Kumayl, there seems to be some bargaining going on, where we put forward some kind of stake on the table, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to recompense us in some way, or not put us in a situation that we don't want to be in, and so on and so forth. Go ahead.
So it's to show our gratitude, like for the bounties what Allah's given us, so we should be thankful for it.
Yeah, ahsan. So one of the key aspects of dua is to verbalize thankfulness. Because thankfulness is not something that is only verbal, but we do need to verbalize it. Yeah? You can be thankful for something, but it is important to say thank you as well. Go ahead.
We're talking to Allah in a way that we've been told to, so it's like a appropriate manner to talk to Allah.
Thank you so much. Yes, especially when it comes onto the du'as that are formulated by the imams. Those are du'as that have been formulated in a certain way which teach us the etiquette of doing this. How are we supposed to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Any other ideas? Forgiveness, yeah. Forgiveness for sure. Definitely. When we make dua, we ask for forgiveness. Any other ideas? Gone? Conversation, yeah. Conversation and communication. I think this here is the key. Dua is a connection. And the thing about dua is that it is a connection which doesn't need a specific environment. Unlike something like salah, where you have to face qibla, for example, you have to be in wudu, and so on and so forth. Dua is something that can come from a person and can be an immediate connection at any time. But dua has some other aspects as well. Dua is an expression of the very need that we have within us, which is why everything in existence is in a state of supplication with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we'll see, hopefully with some of the discussions later as well, the very poverty that a person feels within is a type of dua. Yeah, so dua has a verbal expression, but it also has an existential expression. When you are in need and you're seeking that need from the Almighty, whether you verbalize that need or whether you don't verbalize that need, that is what the essence of dua is. And you've all heard one thing which wasn't mentioned yet, which is that dua is the weapon of the believer. What do you understand of a weapon? What kind of weapon does a believer need? If dua is the weapon of the believer, what would the believer use this weapon for? Protection. So that's a good one. Sometimes we're in a situation where we need protection. So we need a weapon to protect us. What else? Submission. Submission to? Sorry?
Like for example, when we're praying, so we're submitting to Allah, we're talking to Him every day, He's listening to us, what problems we have.
Okay, so it can be a weapon for us in the sense that we use that weapon to show our submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
As an offensive tool to condemn others.
Perhaps even if, so you gave some people a weapon, they would use it to hit other people. Yeah, for sure. How do you feel when you have a weapon? You feel safe. Yeah? It's something that gives you security, that you know that if you get in a muddle or in a mess, yeah, you have something that you can use. And that is really the sense of weapon. Yeah? The sense of weapon that the believer has a weapon with Allah. Not a weapon to use perhaps against others, but a weapon with Allah. when they come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they bring dua, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will respond to them. Yeah? It is, instead of a weapon, why don't we use tool? Yeah? It is the tool of the mu'min. The mu'min knows that they need Allah's help. How are they going to go about that? They are going to use dua. Dua is their weapon with Allah. Not, of course, that they want to fight Allah, but they need to have something on the table. And one of the things they can put on the table is dua. So dua occupies an extremely important place. And of course, when we look at dua Kumayl, the first thing we need to realize it is that it is a communication. The second thing that we need to realize is that it is the type of communication that will bring a response. Okay? And so in order for us to make effective use of that weapon, just like with a weapon, you have to know how to use it. Yeah? If many of us, if I brought nunchucks, yeah, right here, few of us would start spinning it around, but most of us would end up hitting ourselves, right? Because we don't know how to use that kind of weapon, right? So dua, we need to know about it in order to use it. And that's why we need to think about it. Especially a dua like dua Kumayl, we need to know what it means, and we need to be able to think about it. So that is a small introduction. Like I said to you, this dua, we absolutely do not have time to cover most of it. In fact, I think I've already probably eaten up quite a few minutes that have been allocated already. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and talk about a number of sentences. So I want you to look at this sentence. As you know from your recitation of this dua, that this sentence comes very close to the beginning of the dua. When we start the dua of dua Kumayl, we start by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by various things, by Allah's mercy, by Allah's power, and so on and so forth. And this is one of the things we ask by. We say, وَبِأَسْمَائِكَ الَّتِي مَلَأَتْ أَرْكَانَ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. And by your names which have filled the foundations of all things. So, I want to open the floor here again for you to give me some ideas here of what could this mean. I ask you by your names which have filled the foundations of all things.
It's a glorification of Allah.
Yeah, so it's a type of glorification. Everything glorifies Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh.
The thing or person is known by. So we say like there are signs in everything by which we can know Allah.
Yeah, so from the sign that is, if you like, everything is a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so everything is a name in the sense that that's how you know Him. Yeah? Is that the essence? Yeah.
So basically in all of Allah's names there's a spiritual, so blessed. So whenever we say one of His names, we're saying it in terms of our souls, so how to connect to Allah and how to divine submission.
Ahsan, yeah, so the names are a way in which we can connect to Allah. Any other ideas?
Ladies?
No? Okay. This is actually a really deep sentence. In the dua, when I first started looking at it, I thought to myself, should I put this at the beginning or at the end? Because of the depth of this sentence. The arkan of something are, as you know, when you go to, for example, when you go to the Kaaba, you have the Rukn al-Yamani. The Rukn al-Yamani is the cornerstone, which is facing Yemen. Yeah? Or when you have the sides, they are called Rukn. The plural of that is arkan. Now, without those arkan, you cannot have a shape. So they are so fundamental and so essential that without them, you can't have the thing that you're talking about. And that's why they've translated arkan as foundations. So the foundation of everything are these divine attributes. It is the divine attributes that are the foundation of everything. So some of the names, for example, that we're all well aware of are like the All-Powerful, the All-Merciful. Yeah? let's say the kind. Yeah, these are some of the names that we're used to, and of course very many other names as well. But these are perfections which are from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And anything else that has an aspect of that perfection, the source of that perfection is Allah. So for example, right now, I'm speaking, yeah, and you all have spoken. One of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-mutakallim. Allah is the one who speaks. The source of our ability to speak is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many of us are sitting, or some of us are standing as well. For you to be able to sit upright, you need power, you need ability. That ability to stand, that ability to sit upright, comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Furthermore, the ability of this curtain to stand and to be established and to not fall over, it's not something that is essential to the curtain. It's not something that belongs to the curtain in and of its own essence. Rather, it is a perfection from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that enables it to stand. And if you think about it this way, you will see that every single thing in creation has to have a level of perfection. And that level of perfection, the source of it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no other source from where beings have power, from where beings have ability, yeah? From where beings have acts of generosity and mercy. This all comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why there is no place in which the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is absent. Rather, what enables that being to be a being is the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As you can see, this is a very, very deep sentence. And although I've said it in a kind of abstract way, this is a concept that needs to be reflected on very deeply. Because when we understand that everything that we have and every ability that we have, its source is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is a humbling experience. It is something that will not then allow a person to fight against Allah. Why? Because everything they're using to fight against Allah is that which Allah has given them. Right? As soon as you realize that your ability even to move one thing to another place, this is a manifestation of the power of God. Not a manifestation of your own power. You don't own any power. If you essentially had power, then that power could never be removed from you. And one thing every human is very much aware of is that they're strong one day and they're not strong the next day. They just need to be hit with an illness and all of a sudden everything is turned off. They're in their bed and crying for some home remedies, right? So a human being finds themselves in that situation. And so when we realize that it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's perfection that is running this universe, then that also opens a different vista in the way we perceive and we look at all the things around us. We see only Allah's perfection all around us, and that is what has filled the universe. Every single thing is filled with the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is what we are witnessing on a day-to-day level. But of course, it is hard for us to witness that while we are occupied in our minds with other things. When our minds are occupied, it's hard to see that. So, thanks very much for those contributions. Let's move on to our next one. Okay. The next line that I wanted to pick out is this one here. After we've asked Allah by a number of names, we then start asking Allah to forgive us a number of sins. So we have different categories of sins that we ask Allah to forgive us for. But this one is one that has always struck me, even when I was younger and I used to read this dua in the center. This was always one that struck me. A couple of other ones also struck me, but this one especially. It says, Allahumma ighfir li adh-dhunub allati taqta'u ar-raja. Oh Allah, forgive me those sins which cut down hopes. Which cut down hopes. So the question I would like to ask you is, what do you think is the psychology? What happens in someone's mind when sins make them lose hope?
Remorse?
Yeah, so they feel remorse. Suicidal maybe.
I was just going to say, yeah, so if they are losing hope, then they may feel that their sins are so excessive that Allah will not forgive them.
Yeah, so with if you like, with a steady build-up, a person sometimes, the guilt starts to increase so much that they feel that that light at the end of the tunnel is not there.
They might start feeling like a bit depressed
Yeah, for
because
sure.
they're like losing hope.
Yeah, yeah.
The ones they feel like they can't be forgiven for and people won't see them the same and they can't make up for it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So they think that if because people who do so many sins, right? So they think, oh, Allah cannot forgive me for all the sins I've done. So they might fear the fire of hell. That when they die, they might think that, okay, we've not got our forgiveness, so what will Allah do with us?
Mm.
So they might have that fear in their souls.
Exactly. So that fear, that feeling, that anxiety, all of that, this sentence comes and says, oh Allah, those kind of sins that I feel within my very being sometimes, that, man, I keep falling into the same thing again and again and again. I try not to, for example, say bad things about people, but as soon as I get in that crowd, that's it, I can't help it. Or that sin that's affecting me at the moment, I just keep doing the same thing, I can't get out of it. It is that kind of sin that here we are asking for the reversal of it. A sin, because you see, the way the human is that sometimes we're not very aware of what we're going through. So without realizing it, we self-judge ourselves. We say, Allah is not going to forgive me for this. If I do this, it means I'm not religious. It means I'm far away from God. It means God's not paying attention to me. Yeah? But many times, that's just in our heads. That's just in our heads. We do not have any, if you like, proof from Allah that He has abandoned us. We don't have any proof from Allah that there's no hope left for us. We are usually very harsh on ourselves. And yeah, we shouldn't commit sins, for sure. But when sins are committed, we also need to find the light at the end of that tunnel, to see that there is always hope. So when we say the sentence, Allahumma ighfir li adh-dhunub allati taqta'u ar-raja, even if there is not something present in your mind per se, there may be underlying, if you like, judgments that you have made and you have built up that you think you can't necessarily come back from. You'll only be this level of mu'min because you've done things in life and you'll be at this level of mu'min, even if it is level of mu'min. So those subconscious things in this part of the dua, we'll ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us. And of course, this group of lines, if you go back now and look at them yourself, there's some really interesting ones in there. Yeah? And inshallah, hopefully that's the impetus for you to go and look as well. So I'm aware I'm running out of time, but let's keep going inshallah. The next part of the dua I wanted to look at is this. ظَلَمْتُ نَفْسِي. I have wronged myself. Now again, what I'm going to ask you here is, what stands out to you about this phrase? What are the kind of emotions, what are the kind of moods, What is the spiritual state of someone who says that they have wronged themselves? Yeah, so dhalama means to oppress, so I've oppressed myself. It can also be translated like that. The Arabic word can be translated both ways, because when you've oppressed yourself, you have wronged yourself. Yeah, when you oppress, so for example, if you oppress somebody, you also have done wrong by them. Yeah, so it's from that perspective. There's a link between the two words, and that's why it's interchangeable to some extent, the translation.
They have regret and realization of what they've done.
Yeah, so they have regret and realization.
They're like quite humble.
They're humble.
They don't have a big ego.
That's what I'm telling you. From this corner, I'm getting so much good material. So much good material. Definitely. When I see this statement, "Zalamtu nafsi," it really stands out to me. Someone has the courage to admit, having the courage to admit that everything is not right. I have done wrong by myself. I've done it to myself. No, you haven't done it. Usually when we blame people, we say, you wronged me. Yeah, you did it. Yeah, feeling remorseful and regretful. Yeah, for sure. The mic's not working on that side? Just for the AV, they're saying the mic doesn't work on that side. That's why we're having silence.
Yeah, betraying my true self.
Yeah, that's excellent as well. That you have your authentic and true self, and sometimes society's pressure and all of that makes you move away from that true self. Any other here or there? Yeah, so I think we drew out, just looking at this phrase, "Zalamtu nafsi," the ideas of humbleness, the idea of admission, the idea of being able to be honest with yourself and say that this is something I've done to myself, in itself then becomes an impetus for change. Yeah? It is a sentence not just to put you down. It's not a sentence to put you down. A realization is a realization. Sometimes it can be difficult. But it's not just to be "Zalamtu nafsi" and now I'm done. It's "Zalamtu nafsi" and now I'm going to change. Yeah? I've wronged myself. I've just been doing it to myself. But now that I've realized that, now that I've admitted that, now there's space for me now to move out of that situation. So this dua, which we recite every week, when we come to this point here, "Zalamtu nafsi," if we are saying it from the heart and we realize that this is the case, then every single week is an opportunity for a major shift and change. And this is why some of the ulama have said that when you recite a dua like Dua Kumayl, you don't have to recite all of it. Okay? The reason they say you don't have to recite all of it is because what is more important is that you recite some of it, but the some of it that you recite, you mean. Yeah? If somebody comes to the mosque, let's say on a Thursday or at home on, watching it on the live feed or just by themselves, and honestly comes to that conclusion that Thursday, "Zalamtu nafsi," and verbalizes that is an essential part of dua. That's exactly what you're trying to aim for. It is to come to that realization and to then give yourself an opportunity to change. It is always giving you an opportunity. This dua is all about hope. This dua is all about love, as we'll see as well. Okay. I think we have time for one more, which is this one. This is a slightly long one, so what I'm going to do... Okay, let's go for this. Okay, this is a whole paragraph in the dua. O Allah, my Master and my Lord, can you see yourself tormenting me with your fire after I have professed your unity? And after the knowledge of you in my heart, after the knowledge of you, my heart has embraced. And the remembrance of you, my tongue has constantly mentioned. And the love of you, which my mind has clung. And the sincerity of my confession and supplication, humble before your Lordship. Far be it from you. You are more generous than that. Than that. You shouldn't squander him who you hast nurtured. Okay, this is a conversation that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where we are putting our, if you like, our deeds on a scale. Yeah? Putting our case on one side and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if it's really in His nature to punish somebody like this. But this here is a mirror. It is a mirror for a believer. And when I say a mirror for a believer, what I mean is that it is a mirror through which a believer can judge themselves. Why? Because there are traits mentioned here. What are the traits that are mentioned here? Traits of the believer, if you like. Go on. Okay. Yeah, knowledge. Okay, so first of all was knowledge. So profession of unity, then knowledge in the heart. So the first thing the mu'min needs to ask himself before he says this is that, is there knowledge of Allah in my heart? The remembrance, like you said, what type of remembrance? Zikr, but in what frequency? My tongue has constantly mentioned. This is a mirror for us. We're just about to ask Allah. We're putting stuff on the scales, right? And we have here the constant remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next one, love. The deep love that we need to, if you like, cultivate within our hearts. Yeah? And then, of course, sincerely calling by this supplication. Okay? So if you're going to put down, all the chips, yeah, then you have to make sure you got chips. If you don't have chips, then you can't put them down in the bargain. So this is a mirror. This is a mirror for us to think and say, okay, look, I might not be able to say this dua right now with all of that, but by the time I am, it's getting late for me, but some of you maybe not so late, by the time I'm X years old, I want to be able to say this. I want to gain all of these chips. I want to have knowledge in my heart, constant remembrance on my tongue, and if not on my tongue, then in my mind and in my state. I want to have love of God. I want to love God. And that love of God is something that needs to be grown, something that needs to be cultivated. We need to have methods and strategies. Yes, there is love of God that comes to the heart, but when it comes to the heart, if you don't cultivate it, if you don't keep it, then it will also go with everything else, just like everything falls out of the sieve, which is our lives. So learning how to keep that love, and then finally here, to be able to sincerely say this supplication, we have to know what it means, we have to reflect about it. This dua has to be the tongue by which we call on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has to truly express our inner state. Yeah? And I know there is a gap between the Arabic part of it, that it is in a different language, but that is what the repetitive recitation is for. The repetitive recitation is that the Arabic doesn't become difficult for you, something that you've heard so many times. You can even recite it off by heart. But the meaning is something that we need to all work on to make sure that we all understand the meaning. And then the depth of the concepts is something that we need to continually look into. And inshallah, I hope you have many more of these sessions where you discuss not only dua Kumayl. Surah Yasin, which you recite every Ziyarat Waritha, which we do every Thursday. And all of these rituals that we do, they all have worlds of meaning. And those worlds of meaning, inshallah, with reflection, are better than 60, 70 years worship. So inshallah, that brings me to the end of my time. I'd like to thank you all again, especially for the contributions, inshallah. And I ask you all to remember me, inshallah, on your du'as in this night. And let's end with the Surah Al-Fatiha for all of our marhumeen, inshallah, after a salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد